Hey guys. I'm often asked, do you feel like you've ever been discriminated against because you're a woman? And if I'm evaluating my life honestly, I have to say no. In fact, I believe that I've been given countless opportunities that I did not earn, second chances that I didn't deserve, many of which I ungratefully squandered, all because I'm a woman. Truthfully, it's been a lifetime of me being told that I'm awesome for relatively mediocre achievements. Kind of a tough pill to swallow, but it is the truth. So I would imagine that many other slightly above average American women have had a similar experience whereby they coast on their moderate intellect and minor achievements, which are then leveraged to attain various undeserved positions and accolades. Millennials grew up in a participation trophy era in which all students were praised merely for showing up. Additionally, millennial women had this secondary positive reinforcement strategy laid on us. We were taught by parents, teachers, counselors, and society that girls can do anything that men can do, that our potential is boundless, that we're amazing just the way we are, that merely by virtue of being female, we bring goodness to the world because we were born with this value. We cannot fail. And if we do, it must be someone else's fault. That's what I want to talk about today, the larger consequences of giving preferential treatment to girls and what happens when they grow up and attain power, corporate or governmental. There are countless examples of this, but the two that are the clearest embodiment of this kind of female millennial entitlement fully realized have got to be that of Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos and that of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This initially was intended to be a single video, but seeing the explosive phenomenon of AOC continue to materialize, and keeping in mind that Holmes perpetrated a billion-dollar fraud built solely on the power of her golden vagina, I think this is going to have to be a two-parter. Today, Elizabeth Holmes. The story of Theranos has exploded in the mainstream media, so I don't want to delve too much into the actual fraud, but I'll give you the gist. If you're interested, please read Bad Blood, which is excellent and details the entire saga. The Amazon link is below. Elizabeth Holmes, who's now about 35, comes from an esteemed, wealthy Washington, D.C. family. Her mother was a congressional staffer. Her father was high-ranking at Enron. He had some other high-ranking positions as well. Holmes has tons of family money from a business inherited by her Danish grandparents. She was always bright, attractive, curious, and it is said that she is quite charming, although I find that hard to believe. Nonetheless, it is said. She attended elite schools where she took an interest in computer programming and applied to Stanford to study chemical engineering. Of course, she was accepted. She dropped out when she was 19 and used her remaining tuition money to launch a consumer healthcare technology company called Theranos. Holmes supposedly had a fear of needles, so the idea behind Theranos was that full panel blood tests would be administered with just the prick of a finger rather than a full blood draw. She claimed that her testing device, named Edison, would save patients and companies millions of dollars, and that if blood testing became cheaper and easier, it would be done more often, which would save countless lives. Sounds like a good idea, but from the start, her peers and the Stanford professors with whom she shared her vision were pretty vocal about how incredibly unrealistic this sounds. Nonetheless, she was able to get many of her skeptics on board. And that really is the heart of the fraud. Elizabeth Holmes was a master of networking. Before she had even developed a functional prototype, which, by the way, never came to be, she had bamboozled investors out of around $900 million. Although she claimed to have developed this technology, the truth was that she had created a company so litigious, so veiled in secrecy, that she was able to hide not only from healthcare companies and her investors, but from many of her own employees, the extent of Edison's defects. It was virtually inoperable. We've seen plenty of frauds exposed in the last few decades, but what was different about this was that she truly believed that the technology would follow because she could do anything that she put her mind to. She had a motivational quote that was positioned prominently on her desk at Theranos. It read, "What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?" That's a peculiar thought, the inability to fail. It wasn't that she was too idealistic. She's actually ruthless and pragmatic to a fault. Her real failing was believing, because of her charisma and sexual power, wealth, esteem, that no matter what she did, she would not fail. And that arrogance, that conceit, flourished. All the while, she played off these massive character defects as products of youthful idealism. Instead of improving workplace morale, investing in her company's capabilities, or simply readjusting expectations about her product, she doubled down. Her belief that she couldn't fail was largely rooted in appearances. She was pedigreed, educated, cunning, and she knew that with these qualities alone, she could build a massive, well-known company. And once the funding came in, she could invest in the technology. And because she could not fail, she would somehow develop it in time before she was found out. She used her female charm and sexual power to manipulate investors, many of whom were family friends, into giving her hundreds of millions of dollars. She also started banging this gross old Pakistani dude, Sunny Balwani, who invested $20 million in Theranos and became its president and COO. Additionally, she courted very wealthy political families and new tech money alike, but wisely stayed outside of the realm of healthcare. Most of Theranos investors were not well versed in this type of technology, which never really existed anyway. She built the fraud like a house, brick by brick, each brick sitting upon the previous. Her initial investors were well known and respected, and when word got out about their investment, she leveraged their credibility to take on new, even wealthier investors and companies. Walgreens cut her a $140 million deal despite the absence of a functional prototype, although she was using a rigged Edison device during many of the prototype demonstrations. But because Walgreens is such a well-known and stable company, she was then able to leverage their clout and become this media darling. In a glowing bootlicking piece by The New Yorker, complete with your standard self-involved black and white portraits, Holmes, who is clearly a stone-cold bitch, is characterized by her endless kindness. Board members are clearly charmed by Holmes. She is a careful listener and she is unnervingly serene. Employees say that they can't remember an instance when she raised her voice. She has sometimes been called another Steve Jobs, but I think that's an inadequate comparison. Perry, who knew Jobs, said. She has a social consciousness that Steve never had. He was a genius. She's one with a big heart. Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes developed a cult-like following where few questions about logistics were raised, and where, once again, a woman was praised for accomplishing virtually nothing. Now, why is it that she had this reception?
You saw her almost once a week, either gracing a magazine cover or attending a tech conference or a healthcare conference or going on TV.
Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Thank you for having me. I am so incredibly humbled.
We did this.
You founded this company 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Tell them how old you were.
I was 19.
I believe that this obsequious reaction is a result of our society desperately searching for evidence that women, especially young women, are equal in scientific aptitude to men. People saw a weird, kind of autistic, sort of hot young woman and they were like, this chick, she's our Steve Jobs. See, men and women are equal. So they kissed her ass and the media inflated her abilities and, perhaps worst of all, didn't ask any probing questions. I'm not letting the public, the investors, or the media off the hook here. That being said, she is highly manipulative and seems to be something of a psychopath. We've already discussed her inflated ego, but what about her presentation? This video of her using her real voice, which is linked with all of my sources in the description, pretty well sums it up.
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world. And I have to say, I personally was shocked to see that the journal would publish something like this.
No, it hasn't. Well, if I use traditional words to describe what we're doing, it's hard because people then associate it with conventional processes.
She developed this affectation solely to be more influential, to appear more serious, perhaps more commanding. She also adopted Steve Jobs' dress style to create this impression to her Silicon Valley peers that she was following in his footsteps, that she was the next big thing. Paired with her networking ability, she was very successful in creating this persona of success without any of the actual merit. Her merit was also a guise, so she had to develop real powers of persuasion in order to gain the amount of influence necessary to get that staggering amount of funding. So, how does this end? Her company is defunct, her net worth is zero, and she's looking at 20 years. Has that humbled her? Has she realized the error of her ways? Is she falling at the feet of the public or her investors and begging for forgiveness? The desire to protect one's ego, especially a fragile female ego, is just too strong. During her 2017 deposition in front of 12 SEC attorneys, Holmes answered, "I don't know," over 600 times. And these were questions about a company that she created. And get this, word on the street is that she's talking up her next company. So many people are talking about Theranos right now, and I haven't seen a single person correctly identify the real reason that this happened. And that is that we're seeing a flood of entitled women raised to believe that they can do anything and are responsible for none of their failures, intercorporate America and the government. I was definitely not normal, Holmes said. I was reading Moby Dick from start to finish when I was about 9. I read a ton of books. I still have a notebook with a complete design for a time machine that I designed when I must have been like 7. The wonderful thing about the way I was raised is that no one ever told me that I couldn't do those things. The truth is that competition, hardship, failure, and ultimately acceptance of one's limitations creates strong characters. If we keep telling girls that they can do anything, that they're just as strong and capable as any man, we're doing them a disservice. Not to mention ourselves, since we're polluting our own marketplaces with substandard labor, products, and services that social pressures are demanding we adopt, irrespective of their quality. Just think about the wealth that $900 million of defrauded money could have generated if placed in the right hands. We need to teach children, especially little girls, about their own limitations. To teach your child that they can do anything is an absurd lie that will inevitably come crashing down on them. And most importantly, women like Holmes with spectacular claims need to be met with a healthy amount of skepticism. They need to be challenged, their credentials vetted, and their products and services be subjected to the same competitive pressures as that of men. On that note, I will be back soon to talk about the AOC phenomenon, which, surprise, surprise, is much of the same. Thanks, folks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.